Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to just answer a few random questions I get from people about herbs. And these are questions I get rather frequently. Now, a lot of people are new and they may not realize I have videos out on some of this stuff. And I do tend to talk about certain things in my this and that videos, and it can be hard to locate which ones are which. So the this and that videos are more just kind of updates. I'll throw in a little bit of information, but it's good to have separate videos about these different things so they're easy to find and for me to link you back to. Now, a lot of people have questions on things like what kind of herbs should they grow, how much should they use when it comes to the herbs, how to use the herbs, how do they grow the herbs, and it's really all going to be dependent on you. Now, first and foremost, the thing I really want to talk about to start off with is that I am not a licensed or certified herbalist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not licensed or certified in anything related to health type issues. So the only things I have certificates in are like my black belts. And that could be health related, but it's not to do with herbs. And so you need to understand that right off the bat. A lot of people come in and think that I know everything about all the herbs there are out there. No, that's just not the case. What it is that I learn about herbs as I go, as I just try to figure out what herbs do I want to grow in regards to the different health things that I want to make sure that are covered. And then it's also going to be dependent on what I can grow here. Now, if it doesn't grow here naturally or I cannot grow it, then I may not know a thing about it. There's many herbs out there I've never even heard of. I hear about new herbs all the time, but the ones I choose to study and learn most about are those I know I can grow and will use. And so the first thing I can recommend to you is to find out what kind of plants grow well in your area, specifically things that you can forage for, because then you know that even if you don't want to go forage for it, you know that if it grows in your area, if you would rather just grow it right on your property, if it grows in your area naturally, you should be able to grow it on your property. But that also means don't limit yourself to just that. Look into some other herbs that you're interested in. There's different ways that you can do your research to decide what herbs you may want to try growing. Now, I did do a video a while back, several months ago, about how to research herbs. I'm going to go ahead and link to that right up here because I go more in depth on how to actually research the different herbs that you want to, according to the health needs and stuff that you're looking for. Don't be afraid to ask me questions if I know about this herb and that herb, and I'll just be totally honest with you that no, I don't. But if I have a video, because all the time I'm learning, and as I learn I put out new videos, especially if it's something that I've been using and I can testify to its usefulness, then I will have videos on that. And if you're new, that way I can just link you back to videos that I already have on the specific herbs. Like a lot of the herbs you see out here already, I have videos on these. These are just some of the herbs that I grow or have foraged for around us. And I'll talk about some of these in a minute. But anyway, I was showing this book because this is Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast, which is where we live. And so I can look up, let's say you're out going for a walk or whatever, I can look in here and say, okay, I saw this interesting plant, and you may be able to find pictures of it in here. But if you have a name that you can research to see if it grows in your area, that's the easiest thing to do. Then look in here and see what you can find. And books like this will usually give you some general information even about their medicinal properties. And so it's really a good idea to check this out, see if you can find one. I'll go ahead and link to this one below, and maybe through that, I can't remember if I found out whether or not this particular place that wrote this book has ones for other areas, but you should be able to find on Amazon through that link books that will be more related to your specific area. And then the other thing I highly recommend, because books are gold, really, And that is getting yourself several different books, hard copy, about herbs, about all kinds of herbs. And one of the ones I tend to recommend quite a bit is Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs, because this is a great one to start out with, as is Amy Fuell's Homesteader's Herbal Companion. These are two really good books to start out with if you're new to herbs. Very well written. Rosemary's book is especially colorful. Amy's book also has a lot of great pictures and recipes and all kinds of stuff. I recommend these greatly. But something a little more comprehensive that I recommend, and I have others, this is just a few I'm throwing at you to start with, and that is Rodale's Illustrated Encyclopedia of Herbs. And you've heard me and seen me talk about this before if you've been with me at any time. This one has not just illustrations, but lots of great photos and a really good description of the herbs and what they can be used for. So I will link to all of these books down below so you can check them out for yourself. That doesn't mean these are the only great books out there. There's lots and lots of them. These are just the ones I have. I wouldn't mind having more, because I think the more that you have on hand, then you can cross-reference the different herbs in all your books, because you'll find that one book may have a section on this particular herb where this one doesn't. You know, especially when you're talking about books like Rosemary Gladstar's, for instance, though it's excellent, she doesn't cover all the herbs in here. And she's got a lot of really great information and a lot of really great recipes, but she doesn't cover everything. But she does cover a lot of the ones that people are most likely to grow and use, and that includes your culinary herbs. And I will be doing more videos, by the way, on culinary herbs that I grow and use and their medicinal benefits. I do have one out so far that's just that people think of as just a culinary herb, and that was about the sage. I'll go ahead and link to right up there. But a lot of your culinary herbs, if not all of them, are really high in medicinal properties. And so I'll be breaking a lot of those down in future videos to come. But let's talk a little bit about some of your wild herbs that grow. Now, one of the plants that grows around here quite prolifically is the salal. And salal berries and leaves both have really good medicinal properties, and the berries can be used as, you know, in the same way you'd use any other kind of berry for making jams and stuff like that. But I dehydrated both of them together, and one of the top things they're really good for is anything to do with respiratory infections, coughs, colds, flus, and things like that. So very similar to your elderberry, except for the elderberry you can only use the berries, not the leaves. Another one that grows prolifically around here is pineapple weed. There's red clover. This is all stuff grown here. These are all things grown on the property. This stuff we foraged for, and I did do a video on this, I believe, or at least showed it, and I'll go ahead and link to that right up here. So it's 3 iCards I got to keep track, because I can't link to all the stuff I want to talk about. Dandelion, this is just the flower. I also collect and dehydrate the roots and the leaves. The leaves I use in my mixed greens blend, and the roots I dry and use in teas. So here's some of the roots right here, and I need to get more collected. I didn't do any really this last year, so I need to make sure I do more coming up soon, because for me, dandelion roots are best and easiest to collect in the spring, but for most people you're going to find it best to collect them in the fall. Now, moving on to herbs that I grow that don't necessarily grow wild, though they can. Like yarrow does grow wild right along the coast, but not we're not that close to the beach, but right along the beaches these will grow. They like lots of sun, a lot of really good skin properties and styptic properties, and just good all around everything. It can be used internally, it can be used externally. It's also great for repelling mosquitoes and things like that. In fact, I use yarrow in the flea powder that I've made that I don't have a video out on yet, but I'll probably do a video on soon. Mostly it's a flea powder I use in the bed, not necessarily on the dogs themselves. Comfrey is another one I grow on my property. Borage The leaves I dehydrate up and use in all kinds of stuff, from soaps to teas, for adding it to my mixed greens blend, and skin creams and whatever else. And then the flowers, of course, are edible and beautiful. Feverfew, I do have a lot more than this. This is just a jar I had started, and that's as far as I got before they were all finished up for the year. But feverfew, really great for pain and inflammation, as is catnip, which I don't have out here. I have marshmallow leaf. I also have a big jar right over there because I like to use it in tea. I use it in my skin cream. The flowers are also usable, as are the roots. I have marshmallow root right over here. Let's see, nasturtium flowers and nasturtium leaves have their different properties. They're very good for you, easy to grow for a lot of people, nasturtiums. Calendula is another one that's pretty easy to grow. Love calendula, and it's just the flowers that are used in that. And then pansies. I've talked a lot about pansies. And then echinacea. Now, I do have videos on pretty much all this stuff except for the lavender, which is right here, and the comfrey. And I have videos on the pineapple weed, the red clover, dandelion. So another thing I want to talk about is how to find out if herbs are annual or perennial. So let's say you go out and you just buy a whole bunch of herbs. Well, if you're buying the seed packets should say on the back. But if you're not, you haven't bought the herbs yet, the seeds, and you want to know, because maybe you're looking at more perennial type herbs, such as the feverfew, which is perennial, but also is a wonderful self-seeder. It will give you tons and tons. It's, it's kind of like dandelion. It'll just keep spreading and spreading. It's really easy to look this up for yourself. Sometimes I get people that want to give me a list of herbs and then want me to take the time to break down for them and tell them which ones are annuals and which ones are perennials. Now, in that list, they may have a bunch of herbs that they've listed that I don't grow, so I don't know unless I go look it up for myself. And because my time is really limited, I've got so much going on. I talked about it in a recent video as to why, explaining why I'm dropping down to 3 videos a week, because that's where I'm at by the time you're seeing this, down to 3 videos a week. I'm going to go ahead and link to that right up here so you can just kind of understand where I'm coming from. But really, I appreciate the questions and I appreciate you coming in and asking, but when it comes to giving me a list of herbs like that, it's going to be much easier for you to go ahead and search it for yourself. But I realize that there's a lot of people that don't really understand quite how to search for things. So that's what I'm here to tell you. And to also remember that video I linked to at the beginning, I talk about how to research herbs. Now, when it comes to finding out something simple, like if they grow, if they're perennials or annuals, really all you have to do, if you have a book about herbs, look it up in your book and it will tell you whether or not it is an annual or perennial. If you don't have a book, then simply do a search online. It's this easy. Type in the name of the herb, pineapple weed, and you just putting in the name, start looking at the hits. That should be enough. They should tell you, any place you go to that's going to talk about dandelion or lavender should tell you whether or not it's a perennial or annual. Lavender, for instance, is a perennial. That means it keeps coming back each year. If you want to be more specific, then simply put the name of the herb, echinacea, annual or perennial. That's all you have to do. Go to your browser, just type it into the search, put in the name of the herb and add to it annual or perennial, and it will tell you. You will be able to find it. It's super easy. It should be in the first hit that you find. And again, when it comes to, like I said in that other video, I'm not going to try to talk about it too much here because I'd like you to go check that other one. Make sure that you're cross-referencing all the different pages you go to when it comes to the indications, to the properties that they have, because you're going to find each place you go to is going to be a little bit different. And then that comes back down to, again, having a good encyclopedia on herbs that you can refer back to, because some places are people just like me writing blogs and basing it off what they've learned and they've read at other places that may not necessarily be true. So you got to reference back. And because not everything you find online is going to be true. So as long as you can cross-reference everything, find good, reliable sources that you trust. For me, when it comes to things like herbs and and looking at things online, a couple of places I really like to go to are Wellness Mama and drax.com. These places have really good profiles on herbs, and I highly recommend them. And there's several others that I also mentioned in that video that I was just talking about. Other questions I get are how do you use your herbs? Well, there's so many different ways to use them, and some of the ways are going to depend on the type of herb they are or what they taste like, such as feverfew, for instance, is really bitter. It just has, in my opinion, a pretty nasty taste. Now, some people may try to make a tea out of these or an infusion, and to sip on a tea that tastes like this, I would not want to do that. It's just too gross. It just prolongs the pain too long to sip on a tea made out of that. So I prefer to make it as a tincture or an extract using either my homemade wine or vinegar, and it doesn't taste any better, but at least you only need a little bit and you can just drink it down really fast. Another way to take it that would mean not having to taste it at all would be to powder it up and then encapsulate it in your gel caps. Now, I did just do a video on how to make your own supplements, and you can go ahead and check that out right up here, and I show how you can get, where you can get your capsules and how you can fill your capsules, and that's just a really great way to do it when it comes to things that taste nasty. I actually would prefer it that way because it's, when it comes to taking it, it's easier. But that just means I have to buy the capsules, and the reason I like the tinctures and the extracts is because I don't have to buy the capsules. I just make it with my own homemade vinegar, my own homemade wine, or you can use a high proof alcohol, which is usually you can get the strongest tincture, then it's actually a true tincture if it's 80 proof and above alcohol. But I like extracts better because I can make them cheaper. It just means I take a little bit more of it, and I also let it steep for longer. But I talk about that in other videos as well. Those are a couple ways there. So infusions are really my favorite way to take herbs, and infusion is what we refer to as tea. But the reason there's a difference, and this can be confusing, is that we refer to anything as tea if it's a hot drink that has had some kind of herb in it. But technically, tea is actually a plant. And so unless it's made from that plant, it's not technically tea. Some of the things I like to use in my teas would be, in particular, like the marshmallow leaf. I think I have a small jar here somewhere, but I have a bigger jar right over there. Right here is my woolly lamb's ear. I really like this in tea. And obviously mints. Mints are my favorite to make a tea or infusion. Now, what an infusion is any herbal tea or hot drink. Okay, so you've infused the herbs into the hot liquid, which the best way, really, and the way most people will do it when it comes to delicate herbs, is to take the herbs, put it in a tea ball or your homemade tea bag, whatever it is you have, and pour some hot liquid over it and let it steep for however many minutes you want it to steep. I tend to make more of a decoction, even with my more delicate herbs, which could be a matter of debate for some, because there's concern that you could be damaging the delicate herbs. But I like my teas to be my infusions to be very strong, so I tend to like to brew them for a little bit. And plus, I'm usually mixing them with things that should be made more as a decoction. Now, what's a decoction? A decoction is something usually made with things like your roots, like the marshmallow root, the dandelion root, the licorice root, any of that kind of stuff, or orange peels and stuff, where you actually do brew it for a long time, and you brew it down till it's really dark, and you can water it down after that if you want. But again, I like my infusions to be very strong. Now, obviously, some other ways, if they're good tasting herbs like holy basil, oregano, sage, thyme, rosemary, is to cook with them. Put them in your food. Throw them, obviously a lot of the stuff can be used in your spaghetti sauces, your gravies, your soups. I cook with my homemade herbs all the time, and I cook with them a lot. I mean, I put a lot in. I'm very generous about how much of the herbs that I put in. And as well as the dried mixed greens, which have many medicinal properties of their own, or at least health properties. They're high in lots of vitamins and minerals. So any way I can get them into my diet like that is, by cooking with them is great. And then of course some other ways to get some of this stuff is where you're looking at things like comfrey, dandelion, pansies, though the comfrey is a matter of debate whether or not you should take it internally. So I save it for adding to things that I'm going to use, like a salve or in my soaps. Anyway, some other things would be nasturtiums, calendula. Calendula is edible. You can make tea out of it, infusion. I've done it a lot. But I also really like, these are the things I tend to like to use, and borage as well, in anything I'm going to make either a salve out of or soap, because they're so good for your skin and your hair. I do have a recipe of how to make your own skin cream. Eventually I'm going to make another recipe involving some other medicinal herbs that are really good for the skin. And down the road at some point I want to do a little bit experimenting, because I really like creating my own recipes. But if you're new to all this, like I said before, I tend to fly by the seat of my pants when it comes to herbs, which isn't recommended for all. So I also recommend getting a book like, for example, Amy's book, where she talks about dosages and all that kind of stuff, and understanding how to make your different extracts and tinctures and what kind of measurements you should use. I recommend you follow her advice for that. Again, I tend to just put things together and make it, and I've always had good success. But you got to really have a pretty good understanding, especially if you're new to it, because I don't want to throw any information out at someone and have them go try it my way and have it be maybe too much for them or too strong. Which in some of my earlier videos, yeah, I just did that, not really thinking, because it's like, hey, it worked for me. But you have to consider that we're all different. Just like different diets work for different people, same goes for your herbs and the amounts you take and the strength of them, and whether or not you're pregnant, whether or not you're talking about giving them to children or the elderly. These are all going to be important factors to consider when you talk about how much to take or how best to take them. And sometimes, like for us, it's always just experiment. Sometimes it can be a little bit of trial and error, so if that's the case and you don't know for sure, always start small and work your way up. Okay, and then another question I get is, how do you grow the different herbs? Well, if your herbs are already native to your area and they're perennials, there's really not much you need to do. They're pretty simple. It can be just a matter of finding either the seed or maybe the plant growing in the wild and transplant it on your own property if that's where you want it, and then just let it go. Because perennials will, a lot of them will even take over if you're not careful. And I've got a lot of perennial herbs that I grow. They're my favorites to grow because I don't have to worry about them. I don't have to replant them every year. They just keep coming back and getting bigger and bigger. But there are certain ones that either want to make more of, like the echinacea is a perennial, but I want to always keep adding, because echinacea is one of my favorite herbs to grow, as is the marshmallow. So I always every year like to make new plants, because eventually I'm going to want to dig up the old plants, because echinacea and marshmallow roots have their own medicinal benefits, as do the leaves and the flowers though. And so once I have plenty of plants established, then I start digging up the older ones and using the whole plant. Now, when it comes to annuals, a lot of times you may find if you live in a cooler climate, it may be best to start them in small pots in a greenhouse or indoors. I've tried starting them indoors and not had them do so well as when I waited until later in the spring and started them in small pots in my greenhouse. So again, that's also going to depend on your area, how much sun you get, because the problem is within the house we don't have a lot of windows that get a lot of sun. Not until we take that last cedar tree out, then maybe I'll have a window that can get plenty of sun that I can start things in. But you can also use grow lights. So different things to consider. It's all going to be entirely up to you and your area, so you're going to have to do a little research into this on your own. Look into what is your zone, though the zone only plays a small part of what's going to grow in your area, because I mention this all the time. We are in the same zone, which just has to do with the hardiness of the plant, as Deep South Homestead. Yet our climates are pretty much opposite. So zone means nothing when, if you take it by itself. You have to look at your climate, and then even in that, what I can grow here on my piece of property may be different than someone just down the road on their piece of property. So your soil conditions, all these things are going to matter, and it can just really make a difference. Sometimes you just have to keep trying. That's what I do with the marshmallow. When I first started growing marshmallow, I planted it directly. Couldn't get it to grow. In several places around the property, couldn't get it to grow until I started it in a pot in the greenhouse. Now my marshmallows are starting to reseed themselves and make own baby plants right outside, and they're doing fine. So it just was a matter of getting it going and getting it acclimated to this climate. That's why I believe the seeds that it planted from the plants took off, where the seeds I planted straight from a package would not do that. So again, trial and error. You have to just keep trying. And you may finally just say, this herb's not going to work for me, and it may not. It may be that you don't have the right climate for that herb to grow. This year I'm on my second attempt at both valerian and ashwagandha, and this was the first time I got the valerian to actually grow for me, and we'll see what happens. It is a perennial, so we'll see what happens in the spring and see if it makes it through this winter. And the ashwagandha, same thing. It's the second year I've been able to get it to grow, but last year it didn't make it through the winter, and it's a perennial. It should come back. So I'll keep trying, and if eventually they just don't succeed, I may just move on to other plants that have similar properties, such as licorice root, which I tried once, got several starts, didn't make it through the winter, but I didn't try again, so I may try those ones again. So just keep trying, at least for a certain period of time. You got to try, even just on your own property. You will find that certain things will grow better in one spot than they will in another, even with the equal amount of sun and or shade. So it's all, you just never know. It can have to do with how much wind they get, how much exposure to harsh climates and stuff. Like the rosemary, for instance, does best right up against the house, even though it doesn't get as much sun. Rosemary likes a lot of sun, and even though it doesn't get as much sun there as it does out in my main garden, it cannot thrive in my main garden because it gets too much rain, and rosemary doesn't like that much water. So again, it's all going to be dependent on your area. So I can't answer all of these questions directly. I can do my best to head you in the right direction. And so my goal is with this video is hoping to kind of give you an idea, and also to link you back to some other videos that I think you will find helpful. And one of those videos I do want to make sure I mention is my top favorite herbs, at least as of now, that I currently grow. And I'll go ahead and link to that right up here. Now keep in mind, again, we are in the Pacific Northwest, in the rainiest, wettest part of the Pacific Northwest, with 120 inches annual average rainfall, which is actually low. It used to be 144, and we can get as much as 160 inches of rain. So for me, it's been a lot of work figuring out how to get certain things to grow that don't really like a lot of rain. Now, one more question I did want to answer is I get people asking me repeatedly about seeds. Yes, I will be selling a limited amount of seeds off of just some of my herbs. I would like to do more, but time is an issue. It takes a lot of time to collect and dry and to sort all these seeds and getting them packaged up, and I'm not to that point where I'm ready to do that yet, so please give me time. I will have the marshmallow, the feverfew, and borage for sure up on the store, but it will probably be a couple months by the time you see this video. It'll be maybe at least a month by the time you see this video before I get them up on my store. So I'm hoping before the end of December I should have some up. Definitely in January I should be getting some up. So just give me time. I have to wait for certain things, more things to kind of calm down and give me more time to be able to sit down and start working on those seeds. Well, I hope this video helps. I hope it answered a few questions for you and at least gave you a little bit of idea of how you can start looking into this stuff for yourself and learning, because tell you what, that's how I've learned. It's all been self-education and trial and error. Remember, every time you get out in that garden and you plant something, and if it fails, it's not really a failure because you learned one way not to do it. It's all a part of the education, and it's a lot cheaper than college. Okay, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.